Hey guys, welcome to my channel. In this video, I'll be talking about the difference between there is and there are. For starters, we use there is and there are to say that something exists or is in a certain place. The use of there is or there are depends on the noun that follows. So we're going to start with there is. We use there is when the noun that follows is singular. A singular noun refers to one person, place, or thing. So some examples of singular nouns are dog, cat, tree, wall, door, cabinet, book, bed, Sally, car, store, and so on. So next we have examples using there is. Our first example says there is a bird in the tree. As you can see, bird is underlined because it's the singular noun in this sentence. And that's why we use there is. Our next example says there is a book on my bed. As you can see, book is underlined because it's the singular noun in this sentence, and that's why we use there is. Our last example says there is a spider on the wall. As you can see, spider is underlined because it's the singular noun in this sentence, and that's why we use there is. We also use there is when making a list. Our first example says there is a cake, 2 muffins, and a pie in the oven. As you can see, we use there is because we're listing things. And by the way, a list is more than 2 things. And the lists are kind of tricky sometimes because I feel like you can be tempted to use there are because it sounds like you can be using, or it sounds like you should be using there are. But I tried that and it didn't sound right. So I was like, okay, I see why we use there is when it comes to lists. Our second example says there is 2 dogs, 1 cat, and 3 birds in the yard. As you can see, this is a list, so we use there is. And our last example says there is shoes, a jacket, and some shirts in my closet. As you can see, we listed more than 2 things. So we're supposed to use there is. We also use there is for uncountable nouns. Uncountable nouns are nouns that don't have a specific number or nouns that can't be counted pretty much. Some examples of uncountable nouns are group, team, orchestra, band, family, and so on. And there will be examples on the next slide. Next, we have examples where there is being used with uncountable nouns. So our first example says there's a group of people in the hallway. As you can see, group is an uncountable noun. Therefore, we use there is. Our next example says there's a family of 5 waiting to be seated. As you can see, family is underlined because it's an uncountable noun. And so we use there is. How not to use there is. Our first example says there is animals at the zoo. As you can see, animals is plural and not singular, so we shouldn't be using there is. We should be using there are, and we'll get to that, but this is wrong. Our next example says there is cars in the parking lot. As you can see, cars is underlined because it's a plural noun, and it has to be a singular noun if we're going to use there is, so this is incorrect. Our last example says there is shoes on the floor. As you can see, shoes is underlined because it's a plural noun, and in order for us to be using there is, it has to be a singular noun, so this is incorrect. Next, we have there are. We use there are when the noun that follows is plural. A plural noun refers to more than one person, place, or thing. Some examples of plural nouns are dogs, cats, doors, shoes, jackets, earrings, tables, cars, chairs, beds, and so on. So here are some examples using there are. Our first example says there are birds in the tree. As you can see, birds is a plural noun, and so that's why we use there are. Our next example says there are books on my bed. As you can see, books is a plural noun, and that's why we use there are. And our last example says there are spiders on the wall. As you can see, spiders is a plural noun, and that's why we use there are. How not to use there are. So our first example says there are a dog in my yard. Not only does that not sound right, but it's also grammatically incorrect. A dog is singular, so that should only be used with there is. So this is incorrect. It should say there are dogs in my yard. Our second example says there are a car in the garage. This is incorrect because car is singular. To make this sentence correct, it would say there are cars in the garage. Our last example says there are a group of people outside. As you can see, group is a non-count noun, so it should be used with there is as opposed to there are. So this is incorrect. Next, we have are there and are there any. When using are there or are there any to ask questions, the same rules apply as if we were using there are. The noun that follows has to be a plural noun. And there will be examples on the next slide. So our first example says, are there any chairs in the classroom? As you can see, chairs is a plural noun, and that's why we use are there. Our next example says, are there toys on the floor? As you can see, toys is a plural noun, and that's why we use are there as opposed to is there. And our last example says, are there cars on the highway? As you can see, cars is underlined because it's a plural noun, which means we need to use are there. How not to use are there and are there any. So our first example says, are there a dog in the grass? As you can see, this sounds wrong, and dog is a singular noun, so we should be using is there as opposed to are there, so this is incorrect. Our next example says, are there a TV at your place? As you can see, TV is a singular noun, which makes this incorrect. If we said, are there TVs at your place, that would be correct because TVs is a plural noun. And our last example says, are there any food in your fridge? As you can see, food is an uncountable noun, so that makes the sentence incorrect. It should say, is there any food in your fridge? Next, we have is there and is there any. When using is there and is there any, the same rules apply as if we were using there is. The noun that follows has to be singular, and there will be examples on the next slide. So our first example says, is there any juice in the fridge? As you can see, juice is an uncountable noun, so we will use is there. Our next example says, is there time to stop by the store? As you can see, time is a singular noun, so we will use is there. Our last example says, is there food in the pantry? As you can see, food is an uncountable noun, so we would use is there. How not to use is there and is there any. Our first example says, is there animals at the farm? As you can see, animals is a plural noun, so we shouldn't be using animals if we're using is there. Well, we shouldn't be using a plural noun if we're using is there. Our next example says, is there any shoes in the closet? As you can see, shoes is underlined because it's a plural noun, which makes it incorrect. We shouldn't be using a plural noun with is there. Next, we have, is there clothes on the floor? As you can see, clothes is underlined because it's a plural noun, which makes it incorrect. We shouldn't be using a plural noun with is there. Next, we have there isn't. When using there isn't, the same rules apply as if we were using is there any, and there is. The noun that follows has to be singular, and I'll be putting examples on the next slide. Our first example says, there isn't time to play games. As you can see, time is a singular noun, and that's why we use there isn't. Our next example says, there isn't a dime in my purse. As you can see, dime is a singular noun, and that's why we use there isn't. And our last example says, there isn't an oven in my apartment. As you can see, oven is a singular noun, and that's why we use there isn't. Next, we have there aren't. When using there aren't, the same rules would apply as if we were using are there any, and there are. The noun that follows has to be plural. Our first example says, there aren't any good movies in theaters. As you can see, movies is a plural noun, and that's why we use there aren't. Our next example says there aren't kids in my neighborhood. As you can see, kids is a plural noun, so we would use there aren't. And our last example says there aren't any eggs at the grocery store. As you can see, eggs is a plural noun, and that's why we use there aren't. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you found this video informative. If you did find this video informative, please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, or all of the above, and I'll see you next time.